It's my absolute pleasure to introduce Steve Sarowitz, who is the co-founder and chairman of Paylocity, and he's also the co-chairman of Wayfarer Studios and the founder of Wayfarer Foundation. I would love to hear a bit more about what inspired you to start Wayfarer Foundation and Wayfarer Studios.
So I became a Baha'i in February of 2015, and 3 days later I emailed my friend Farshid, and I said, I'm a Baha'i now, I just want to retire and teach the Baha'i faith. Farshid said, that's great, you can do that and reach hundreds of people, but if you make a movie, you can reach millions of people. And I didn't think much of it right then and there. Less than an hour later, I got an email from a movie producer. I'd never ever talked to a movie producer, I didn't know anything about making movies. His name was Peter Samuelson. He was emailing me about doing philanthropy, about helping foster children. Well, we ended up doing the foster children work, and I happened to be going to LA the next week, ended up meeting with Peter, and it put me on this 3-year odyssey to make a movie called The Gate, Dawn of the Baha'i Faith. Along the way, I met some Baha'is who were in the movie business. One of them was Rainn Wilson, and the other, actually met several, but another key person was Justin Baldoni. And Justin said to me, I told Justin, if you ever need my help, I'll help you. And he said to me, well, I'm looking to raise $1 million from my little company, which was called, at the time, Wayfarer Entertainment. And I had gotten to know Justin a little bit, and I surprised him. I said, Justin, I don't really want to help you raise money. I want to become your business partner. And then he asked me about 40 questions to make sure I was worthy to be his business partner. I'm still not sure I'm worthy to be his business partner, but we became business partners, and we are building Wayfarer Studios together.
Wonderful.
And then the Wayfarer Foundation started a few years ago because I needed to do something for Baha'i giving, and I really needed someone to help me vet those donations. And I ended up hiring Laura Herrick, and she and I have built the Wayfarer Foundation over a few years. This year we're going to be giving away $19 million in the interest of peace and unity, world peace.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you for sharing that. I'm curious, as you look at the evolution of your career, how have you thought about the intersection of spirituality and business?
When I first became a Baha'i in 2015, I thought there wasn't much intersectionality. I had been in the business world. I'd seen, as other people have talked about, kind of a dog-eat-dog mentality. I thought, well, I've got my spiritual life here, and way over here I've got my business life. And at the time, I was a very enthusiastic, well, I'm still a very enthusiastic Baha'i, but all I wanted to do was tell people about the Baha'i faith. I didn't need to work. My company had gone public. I figured, well, don't have to worry about that piece. That's my past. This faith thing is going to be my future. And over the last 8 years, I've started integrating. I started realizing slowly that really to integrate business with faith made a lot more sense, and that I could do a lot more good in the world. As I've come to realize a little bit more about faith, I realized that faith should be best used in every aspect of your life. And so to me, my faith starts when I wake up in the morning and ends when I go to sleep at night. Everything I try to do is to leave the world a better place. And I have these God-given gifts as an entrepreneur, as a business person, and I'm trying to take these gifts and combine them with the Baha'i teachings and really the tenets of my faith about the oneness of humanity and the elimination of prejudice.
Wonderful, thank you. I'm curious, what advice would you have for others who are looking at the intersection of spirituality and business?
I think that, first of all, make sure you get your values down. So think about it, and what are your values? Live your faith. Never compromise. I'll give you an example. The president of Wayfarer Studios is so many of you here probably know him as the wonderful Jamie Heath, who's also a very talented musician. And he came to me a couple days ago just to see my thoughts. He said, we have a movie called Ezra, which we made with Robert De Niro. And he said, we got a $400,000 offer to put it in Russian-controlled territories. And that's illegal technically, but there's a loophole, and they did it with John Wick, and we could do it as well. And my one question to Jamie is, in your opinion, is this in line with the spirit of the US law? Forget about a loophole. He said, no. I said, well, there's your answer. And he agreed with me, and it was because we're both Baha'is. We respect the law of the country we're in. And it doesn't matter if there's a loophole. The idea is we always take the higher road. And so I guess my advice is don't go to church on Sunday and then spend the other 6 days doing things that go against what you do in church. Or, no matter what faith you are, and I know there's people here of many different faiths, no matter what faith you are, it's all about, really every faith centers around the love of God and the love of humanity and loving your neighbor. And if there's any exceptions to which neighbors you love, you're probably doing something wrong.
That's a really powerful example in terms of the reflection on values. And curious, if you think about for companies that are wanting to create space to have more of a conversation around values, like, do you have advice of best practices that you've seen within the organizations that you've been part of?
Well, I'm learning. Payam does a great job with One Planet. Laylee Miller, who's here, is helping me make all our companies to take our values into our companies. So we're with the foundation, because we are Baha'i inspired, we study the Baha'i writings, and most of the employees at the foundation are not Baha'i. And it's really great because I go there and they study the highest Baha'i administrative body is the Universal House of Justice. And I go into our meetings and the people who aren't Baha'is are telling me things from the letters from the House of Justice that I don't know, which I think is great. Most importantly, they know why we're doing things. They know where these things are coming from. And I think it's true with any company. If your company is faith-based or faith-inspired, I think it's really important to be consistent. And so we don't just, and I think, I remember somebody just told me that, who just came into, I have also a theater as well. And he said, I asked him how things were going. He said, what I really like is you're very consistent with what you say and what you do. And I think that's really important with people of faith, that you have to live your faith and live it every day. And number one, tell all your employees, this is what we're going to do. Set your standards and then live up to them, which is the harder part.
Yes, definitely. You mentioned in terms of with the Wayfarer Foundation that one of the big goals that you're working towards is peace. I know that's a big passion of yours. Like, what do you think is the role of business as it relates to promoting peace?
The most important thing in the world right now is peace and unity. When you look at all the major problems in the world, every single major problem, global warming, economic problems, even look at COVID, which seems like it's medical. What does that have to do with unity and peace? If the world had been united when COVID came, it would have been much less stressful. Millions of people would have been saved, but we weren't united. So each country had to fend for themselves. There was fights over who gets the vaccine, who doesn't. We didn't work together to produce a vaccine. The same thing with global warming. Look at the wars going on right now. Humanity has not yet realized as a whole that we're one human family. And so the most important thing, I'll give you an example of that. My wife is on the board of the Sierra Club Foundation, and I've observed her over the years. I talk to her when she comes home from her board meetings, and they're playing, if anyone's heard of the game Whack-A-Mole, where they're just basically hitting one problem, then they're hitting another problem, then they're hitting another problem, and the problems just seem to multiply. They get one, and another one pops up. And the reason, again, is lack of unity. If all the countries in the world gathered together in unity and started going after all the major issues to cure the problems we have with the environment, with climate change, we could fix this, and we could fix this much faster. And again, every single major problem we have boils down to a lack of a unified response to it. And of course, the wars we're seeing right now, most notably the one that's in the headlines right now, is between Israel and Hamas, and indirectly Iran. It's tragic that people who worship the same God and were created by the same God have failed to realize that, and that we still fail to realize that. And so teaching these things, that we're one human family, and infusing it in everything we do is extremely important.
And to that point, when you think about the process of infusing principles around unity and the oneness of mankind within an organization, how do you go about doing that? What does that look like?
So with Wayfarer Theaters, for example, which is my latest venture, and also with the foundation and Wayfarer Studios, we've created our values. And then we just had with Wayfarer Theaters, we had a session to go through the values, and we went through the Baha'i writings with, again, most of the employees not being Baha'is, and going through the basis. This is where this value is coming from here. So, for example, one of the writings we read was, O children of men, know ye not why we created you all from the same dust, that no one should exalt himself over the other. Ponder at all times in your hearts how you were created, since we created you all from one same substance, it is incumbent on you to be even as one soul, to walk with the same feet, eat with the same mouth, and dwell in the same land. And so this is the underlying basis for our values. And so it helped the employees to understand where we're coming from in a much deeper level.
Wonderful, thank you. We have a question from the audience, thank you. So how do you deal with the stigma surrounding faith in an increasingly secular society?
How do I deal with it? How should I deal with it? Well, so there's some of you may not know me, but for those of you who know me well, I don't shy away from talking about faith. My good friends know that I talk about it a little bit too much, but for me, I think that we are in a society, we're in a world that's in a whole world of hurt right now. We've got wars going on, we've got incredible, an explosion of mental illness, especially among the young. We've got just societal anxiety. I think the morals of society are breaking down, and that's obvious in our music, in our movies. I'm in the movie business. And so we're having, all of our systems are breaking down. And so we need better answers. And so for me, the way I usually lead into faith is I ask people, how do you like it? How's the world going? Is it going well? And most people, believe it or not, don't say yes. But then I start asking what their solutions are. And so when they don't have them, I say, well, then I can tell them there are solutions, and here's some of the solutions. And so addressing the problems of the world is a really good way to talk about faith. In particular, my own faith, the Baha'i faith, is addressing directly problems like racism. The July 22nd, 2020 letter from the Universal House of Justice, for those of you who don't know, that's the highest Baha'i administrative body, is my Bible for addressing racism. I've read that letter 100 times. How do you address sexism? How do you address nationalism? And throughout the Baha'i writings, which these are key parts of the Baha'i writings, it's giving us answers to some of the hard questions. I mean, racism is a very thorny issue. And so it's not just, hey, racism is bad, you got to get rid of it. What do I have to do as a white person? What do I have to do as a white man? How do I treat it when a person of color doesn't necessarily trust me when they first meet me? Do I get angry, or do I show patience? Do I think to myself, well, there might be a reason, and this is right in the writings. It says that white people have to work on their natural sense of superiority, which they've been taught. It's not a natural thing, but they've been taught this terrible white supremacy, and that we have to be, all of us, black and white, have to be patient, people of all colors, with each other, because this is a very hard issue and it's been around for generations. And so these lessons help me as I'm trying to solve these problems.
Thank you. Thanks so much for sharing that. I know investing is also a big part of your life, and I'm curious, how do you think about integrating spiritual principles into your investment work?
Well, first of all, in the philanthropy and investments, we are very focused on women and people of color. And the reason, I've said this many times, is not because I prefer people of color, it's because the other thing that society is not. I think everyone is equal. Everyone is a child of God. I try to love everyone equally. But people of color have been systematically left out, and it's been talked about already at this conference, of investments. There's just a tiny, I think Darren gave the figure, it's like 1 or 2% women and people of color. It's just terrible. And so this great inequity, so part of what I like to do as a Baha'i is address these inequities. So as an investor with philanthropy, I lean very heavily towards working with those. I put it this way: we're all flowers of a garden. Some flowers have had a little less sunlight. Some flowers have had a little less rain. And so my job as someone who's been giving excess resources to share those resources with people who have had less. It's as simple as that. And the interesting thing with that, to me, is it's really blessed me tenfold. We had a conference last year, our foundation did, Reimagining Racial Justice, and that was simply amazing for me just to be a participant. And I was just happy. I was like thinking to myself, as I was there, I was just happy to be there and be a fly on the wall, because there was so much life to that conference and it was so enjoyable. there are so many people, just give them a little bit and they can do so much in the world. I have a company I've invested in the audience right now, I'm looking at them, called Tiny Souls. And first of all, it's a female-owned company, but second of all, it's about putting virtues into children's media, which I think is hugely necessary. And so for me, there's two things I look at. Number one is investing in women and people of color, but number two, investing in companies that make the world a better place. So we have a long list of things my wife and I have that we don't invest in. We won't invest in a company that sells alcohol. We won't invest in a company that sells pot or drugs. We won't invest in typically fossil fuel companies, fast food companies. But we try to invest in companies that make the environment better. We try to invest in companies that are working on unity. We try to invest in companies that lift up people of color and women. So it's basically companies that not only are owned by people of color and women, but also serve our society and make our society better, that make our health better, that make everything more equitable and just for all of us.
Wonderful. Yeah, I had a chance to attend your Reimagining Racial Justice event, and it was incredible. Of the $82 trillion that are invested, less than 1.4% is into women and people of color. So it's crazy. So we have a number of questions from the audience, and I'll combine a couple of them. But as you think about sort of practical steps for living a cohesive life around the integration of spirituality and business and investments, how do you think about that? And what does your day-to-day look like in terms of the integration of the two?
I get up in the morning. I pray. I actually say a prayer for my son every morning. I have two children, both 20 years old. I'm actually praying throughout the day. I've memorized only the Arabic. There's a book called The Hidden Words. I've memorized half of it, which is the Arabic half. So I say those every day. And then throughout the day, I'm generally meeting with people. A lot of Zoom calls during the day. I travel a little bit. If you had to divide my day up, I do probably equal parts of faith and philanthropy, and then business is almost third to me. Making movies is important. I'm very passionate. But everything I do is kind of along the same line. So Wayfair Studios is Baha'i inspired. I also have Spring Green, which is a direct Baha'i studio, which makes pure Baha'i content. And then Wayfair Foundation is Baha'i inspired. So, and the Wayfair Theaters, my latest, is also Baha'i inspired. So I'm making movies that uplift the soul. That's what Justin and I are doing. We're showing the nobility of every human being. And Wayfair Theaters, we're showing those movies. We're showing movies made by other people. We're showing documentaries. We had an incredible thing a couple weeks ago. We had a friend of mine named Masood Olafani come in and do a one-hour show of Frederick Douglass. And everyone who saw it was just, and by the way, anyone who wants that, let me know and I'll put you in contact with Masood, because everyone should see it in their area. It was quite amazing. And everyone who saw it was just amazingly touched, not only by his 1 hour show, but by the Q&A afterwards. And so what we're doing at our theaters, we do a lot of Q&A, we bring people in. We just brought in the wonderful Gina Davis, who does a lot of work on gender equity and really helping women get equality in Hollywood. And so we try to bring in interesting people to have interesting dialogues. I think we spend too much time as a society numbing ourselves. And if you look at the movies, the typical movies, they're not made to make you think. Hollywood, I think, is run by greed, and it's run by fear. And so you end up with a lot of movies that are very violent. They tend to hit the lower things, all the greed, lust, violence. All of that is at front and center in many Hollywood movies. And it's really almost to numb you. You spend an hour and a half, 2 hours not thinking. And we're doing a lot, if you look at the drug use and the alcohol use in society. And my goal is to start having conversations and really, in a sense, the Bible talks about the rapture, about the uplifting of souls. And to me, everything I'm doing is to try to hasten that, to really uplift and expand the spirituality of humanity. And part of the reason I'm so invested in movies is because I think movies are uniquely qualified to do that.
Amazing. Thank you. Masood is definitely incredibly talented, so would very much encourage people to check out his work. So we're going to be about to close out our time together, but I have one final question for you, which is, what do you think is the main thing that can contribute towards the betterment of the world, and what final words of advice do you have for us?
The spiritual education of youth. going back to Tiny Souls, what they're doing. I think that, imagine a world where every single child is schooled on the virtues from the very youngest age: love, compassion, mercy, justice, truth, unity. What if every single child was taught that we're one human family from the time they're very young? And so the Baha'i Faith has this system of children's classes, junior youth classes where they're taught to serve from a very young age. I believe in this country what we're doing largely is not teaching our kids spiritually from a very young age, and actually treating them as very young, much younger than they really are in terms of what they can do. I would love to see empowered youth working on solving the actual problems in the world at a very young age. We have this great resource, and it's turned into a liability, because you see, at least in my town, I see young people acting absolutely terribly. I'll just give you an example. My friend is a fourth grade teacher. She had a young man, first of all, talk back to her in class, then he gave her the finger, then he threw his iPad at her, and then he curled up into a little ball when she still wouldn't get upset. Took him to the principal's office, and he went home and told his parents what happened, gave his version of it. The principal fired her from the school, and she had to beg to get her job back. And so she did get her job back, but she had to beg. But this is happening all over the place, where there's this just terrible behavior happening in schools to the point where it disrupts the school. And this is a clear lack of spiritual training from a very young age, and it's happening all over the country. I think more in some areas than others. If we did this, if we did what I'm talking about, we would eliminate virtually all crime. We would have a society which would eliminate war, it would eliminate virtually all crime. Healthcare would be just completely revolutionized. Every aspect of human life would be revolutionized to the point that almost none of us would be able to recognize the paradise on earth we're going to create. And as a Baha'i, I believe that this type of future is not only possible, but inevitable. And it's time for us to all work for it.
Think of sharing what you know.